Welcome to Licking Non-Vanilla, a sex-positive hour of talk about kink, sexual mores, and writing dirty words. So grab a cup of cocoa, your favorite easy chair, and the lube as we go sailing into the dark, sweet waters of all things naughty. On Licking Non-Vanilla with your hosts Ralph Greco Jr. and M. Christian.
Hey everybody, welcome to Licking Non-Vanilla with me, your host, well, one of your hosts with the most, Ralph Greco Jr. Across the aisle from me is...
Chris, other words known as M. Christian.
And we've been talking about the weather here. It's been snowing on the East Coast. Chris, you're getting a little rain still, or what do you got over there?
It's cold and rainy, but we haven't got snow. At least we haven't got it here in Eugene. I know Portland got it. So, and they're having problems with it as well because it's not as bad as what's happening with you guys. And, you know, heaven forgive the poor people in Texas, but it's still kind of affecting area up there.
Yeah. Now, to the listeners, do not get in your van and go to Eugene looking for Chris. Because he's got way too many fans as it is. He doesn't need that. He doesn't need people coming to his door like always, and he can't even walk on the street anymore. That's how bad it is. So just give the guy a break.
You're too same, Ralphie. It's like you got to, all those fans are like, blocking the driveway and taking
just
parking
give the
places.
guy a break. Give the guy a break. Really, it's just not fair on any level. And once again, when we got into the show, we're using a new interface, which is wonderful because now I can see Chris when we do the show, and we're hearing each other well. And when we're shout out to any guests who want to come on, we're going to be able to really do it up right now and be able to see you if you want us to see you and the whole thing. But anyway, before the show starts, though, there's a countdown and big numbers come up on the screen. And every single time, Chris and I start laughing because it reminds us of actually, Chris, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of UFO more than Thunderbirds. Remember, the UFO had the numbers, the Gary Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris and I are we're geeking out on you here, but we're going back to, was it Gary or Jerry Anderson?
I think
that
it
made
was
those shows.
Gary and Sylvia Anderson. I'm embarrassed because I should know this because I was a huge fan of the show growing up. It was one of my all-time favorite show. That with the Avengers, the one with Emma Peel and John Steed. That's what I keep thinking of is that 5, 4, 3. But the shows around that period had some great openings. I mean, UFO was a great example too. I mean, that was a fantastic one.
And I remember the Prisoner had a great opening. Remember the Prisoner's opening?
Oh God, yes. Oh yes.
So Chris and I are what we're doing here. We're really geeking out on what was British television of the '60s, and so ITV and BBC.
Mm-hmm.
There were some really imaginative fantasy shows. They were either science fiction based, or gothic horror based, or just bizarre. And actually, Thunderbirds was marionettes, so was Supercar, right?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, exactly. And so it was Supercar and Fireball XL5 and Joe 90, and because UFO and Space 99 were all live people, but they used models. People. So
crazy stuff. So ever get a chance to YouTube this stuff that we're talking about? It is a lot of fun, especially if you're a science fiction geek. Also, what's fun about UFO, I was watching UFO recently on Amazon, and the costumes on the girls are fantastic. I mean, you want to talk about sexualizing the girls. It's just fantastic. These little short skirts and these purple wigs, and it's mesh shirts for the men. I mean, it's just completely over the top. It's really a lot of fun, really. Was always an edge of more, I think, British television. They got away with a lot more sexuality than we ever did on regular television. Right?
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, and it's funny because Sylvia Anderson actually did all the fashions. And I remember reading somewhere that because people are saying why do the women the female officers on the moon are wearing wigs, and it wasn't because of any outre reason, like it was some kind of thing to do with about being up there. It was because she thought that wigs would be so common that people would just wear them, and it just kind of worked out that way. But yeah, the Brits, it's weird because the Brits are usually fairly conservative, but they've also done some more outrageous stuff. I mean, my favorite example is A Touch of Brimstone from the Avengers, where Emma Peel is dressed as the Queen of Sin. And
this is
that one
great.
was actually banned in the U.S.
This is a great example because I didn't know about this example. Now, anybody who's a fan of the Avengers and Emma Peel with she's in like a black leather most of the time, a bodysuit, right? I mean, that's what she's wearing most of the time.
She's wearing a corset, leggings,
no, but
and boots, and a spiked
I'm talking
collar.
about regularly.
Oh, I mean, regularly. Yeah, regularly she wears like a catsuit.
Right, and she's catsuit, and she's body chop. She's karate chopping. But this episode that Chris speaks about, and he told me about it when we were away in Vegas, but I saw it. And Chris, just give. We talked about this before, but give a little bit about that episode because it is out of hand. It's crazy.
Well, it's funny because it was part of the black and white years of the Avengers, and believe me, I'm such a geek around the Avengers. I pretty much have it memorized. But it's called A Touch of Brimstone, and it starred Peter Windegaard, and it's basically about a bunch of like typical Avengers episodes. There's an eccentric group of people. In this case, they're recreating the Hellfire Club, which was something that existed, I think, around the 1700s. And I actually know more about it than I remember. But if you're interested, the Hellfire Club is really fascinating to research. It was actually called the Amorous Knights of Wycombe and was run by, Lord Dashwood. But anyway, long story short, so they infiltrate this group. And at one point, Emma makes appearance as the Queen of Sin, which is wearing this black corset, again, black boots, leggings, and a spiked collar. And it was funny because people said, "Oh my God, this is so forth." But she actually designed the outfit.
And did she really? That's fantastic.
Exactly. And it actually was banned in the U.S. for a number of years. And I thought it was kind of funny because the Brits are usually kind of seen as being fairly conservative around these kind of things, especially around that time period. But it was actually banned in the U.S. and not there. And you can still find it. In fact, if you just type a YouTube search for Queen of Sin, the Avengers, I'm sure it'll pop right up.
But what I saw, there's whips in this episode, right? Like she's fighting with the guy. He's like whipping her at one point. It's out of hand.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's really outrageous. In fact, Carol Cleveland is in it, who's one of the unofficial Pythons.
Is she really? She must be really young in that.
Oh yeah. If you check it out, you can see her. She's in there. I think it was a couple of years before the Python. So I'm not too sure exactly how old she was at that time. But I mean, there's a scene actually where Windegaard has a whip and he's trying to get her, and there's also it's really kind of a playful version of decadence. In fact, one of my favorite lines is they're depicting these people are wearing like Regency wigs, and it's kind of a bacchanal. I mean, once again, they can't really show anything because it's the Brits and it's 1960s. But at one point, I remember that I think it was either Steed or Emma comment, "Oh, it's just innocent fun." I thought, well, that's cool. They're not passing judgment. They're saying this is cool, except for the fact these guys have an ulterior motive. But I just think that was really cool that they're just like, just a play. They're just having fun, and it's a really great episode. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, and it is, and Chris is saying too, it's the black and white years, right? It's not the color years yet. Mm-hmm. And the black and white years, I mean, you forget about how influential her fashions were. She was wearing stuff that that certainly became part of the mainstream fashion culture, but the black and white stuff just has a whole different vibe to it, that a sexier vibe in some ways, and a more dangerous vibe. And she's all but, she's, I mean, on the best of days when she's not trying to be sexy, she's pretty damn sexy, Have you ever seen the silent film? There's a silent film that she made from.
Called Mini Killers. It's actually a promotional thing. Yeah, it's up on YouTube, and it's really bizarre because it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I actually read a little bit about this. If I remember correctly, they used to have these little televisions set on gas pumps, and they had produced these little short films that would play, when you come up there. And if anybody out there, and I'm getting this wrong, please yell at us on our website, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. So this was this weird little silent film that they had created. It's like in 3 parts, and they're all like about 10 minutes long, I think, or something like that. But it's very bizarre. I mean, there were some strange things going on around that time anyway. But really that's a strange little film. You can definitely find it on YouTube, or at least usually you can.
Because she recently died.
She passed away. So I think, I mean, I know Patrick Macnee passed away as well. So that's it's really sad. But they had good careers and good runs. And I know Diana Rigg was knighted. She was Dame at Diana Rigg. And she actually appeared in a couple of recent Doctor Who episodes, or recent
She was in
Doctor
great.
Who
Was she in
episodes.
Game of Thrones too? I think
She was in Game of Thrones
right?
as well. Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
And her daughter actually is an actress.
See, what's interesting about it too, when I did the research when she died, I think I wrote something up from somebody. She fought for her salary too at a time when she was not making the salary she wanted to make, and a crew member was making more or something, and she fought for her salary.
Yeah, it was,
and even her agent backed up. He's like, I don't want to get involved in this. She was we talk about feminism,
It's really sad because, she was really the star of the show. And she found out that I think like the cameraman was making more than she was, and she protested, and they wouldn't relent, and they switched over to Thorsten. I can't remember her first name offhand. And it's really unfortunate because she really was, I mean, not to dismiss Thorsten, because she was actually good in her own right. And any Avengers fan knows that she actually carried some really good episodes. But it was really disappointing that the BBC, I think it was ITV or BBC, I can't remember who produced it, wouldn't relent. It's like, come on, this is the person who's making your show. But yeah, it's unfortunate. But she still had a wonderful run. And, from what I've read, she had a good time. So that's also important.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really love those shows. They're the perfect example of that surreal, groovy 60s aesthetic. And my particular love of it was, one, she's sexy, but I love the fact that their relationship, because they weren't couples, but they were obviously cared about each other a lot, and they really treated each other as equals, which around that time was pretty rare.
Right. I recently saw too, talking about a great 60s sex romp, I saw What's New Pussycat, which is, that movie's just so out of hand. And I mean, what's great about all this stuff, that you can find all this stuff now on either Netflix or YouTube, and that's another great movie of just a ton of really sexy girls running in and out, kind of half clothed, kind of not, and O'Toole, was it O'Toole, right? Just trying to keep it all together. I
think it was O'Toole. Woody Allen was in it. I can't remember who
Woody
else,
Allen's
the comedies of that 60s and 70s were bizarre. Wonderfully really bizarre. Fun. I mean, everything from Peter Sellers and I Love You, Alice B. Toklas, to Casino Royale, which was a train wreck, but it's a glorious train wreck.
It's wonderful.
With Dahlia Lavi and, Woody Allen playing James Bond. And then you got like all these bizarre, strange, twisted comedies. I love them. I mean, it's like they just really did things that no one else was doing. I mean, that was, don't get me started, but that was one of my favorite periods in cinema, because everyone was just kind of throwing the rule book out. So you had everything from the French Connection to, Seconds to, Clute to, I mean, all these, wonderfully very, very different movies, and very often not black and white. I mean, they were very ambiguous around their tone.
Just a lot of great stuff that's really where you saw stuff. You had to go to the movies to see stuff. You couldn't get it anywhere else. So you'd be waiting. And I remember one of our favorite movies when it came, my buddy's mom and dad went to go see Clockwork. And I remember asking about, because Clockwork Orange was rated X. And I remember asking her, I must have been like 13 or 14. And I asked her about why, as best as I could, finding out why the movie was so controversial and why it was rated X. And she said to me something that stuck with me. And I don't know if she got the movie, but she said, it's just disturbing. Everybody kind of acts the same. And I was like, okay. And I still to this day know what she meant, but I don't know if that's not my takeaway of Clockwork. But, a movie like that, my God, the controversy that movie engendered. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And
it was banned in the UK.
Yeah, right, banned in the UK. And, we had things like, you heard about, even movies like, what's the one with Raquel Welch and Rex Reed?
Myra Breckinridge.
Myra Breckinridge, which is another, talk about a train wreck with 70-year-old Mae West or however old she is in that. And that's I don't know if you ever seen that one, guys. That's one to check out too, because that's
in Rex Reed, and it's
Rex Reed.
Bizarre. I mean, bizarre is not the right word. It's not really good, but it's bizarre. But you also had Dr. Strangelove, 2001. It's it was just that the whole period. There were just so many fantastic films, and again, they just didn't. They didn't play safe. Some of these films were really out there.
Oh yeah,
and that's why I love watching them, because they really took some serious risks. And They didn't have huge budgets either. So sometimes they're just like, throwing things out there and just, trying to do things. Cassavetes did a lot of work during that time. Scorsese did a lot of work around that time. Frankenheimer did a lot of work around that time. It's like, films were not as commercialized, I think, in some ways. Maybe I'm just being ignorant, but, because then nowadays it's like everything is like, turned into franchise. Don't get me wrong. I love the Marvel movies. I'm a sucker for Marvel. But yeah, it's just like, you still find it a little bit in independent films, but not quite as much as it was, I think, during that time. Right. But maybe I'm just being a crotchety old fart.
Well, I'm always a crotchety old fart. So, I just love that stuff. This stuff, stuff I go back to time and again. And there's some deep veins of really good ideas. Certainly some incredibly hot stuff, hot scenes, sexuality that in ways that has never been presented since. I know they talk about, the new series on Netflix or Amazon, how outrageous they are and how sexual they are. And, it is of its time. Game of Thrones too was supposed to be a lot of naughty stuff and that stuff. But if you watch, and again, it could just be our sensibilities because we're older, but if you watch stuff like even Myra Breckinridge is as much of a train wreck as it is, there's a certain feeling to that naughtiness that's totally different than now, which has got to be that way. It makes sense. It's going to be that way, but and speaks to us, and there's a nuance to it, I guess, is what I'm looking for, But
I think it's also because when we were, go ahead. I mean, I think also it's a lot of it is, we talked about this before, again, sounding like the two guys sitting on the porch telling kids get off their lawn. But, when we were growing up, sex was something that was very, very kind of like shut off. You were lucky if you found, oh my God, a nipple, or if you found anything explicitly sexual. Nowadays, of course, it's very easy. So I think it's kind of changed the framework, how people look at sex and eroticism and so forth. But I remember like, these things were like the only time you actually saw, oh my God, bare people. And, without having to go to like, the tiny little strip mall porn shop that you don't want to ever think about going in there. So that sort of changed things as well. But even other things, I mean, look, this is the era of Harold and Maude, for God's sakes. I mean, this is like, can you try and make like Harold and Maude these days? It's like, I think, people just wouldn't get it. And it's a magnificent film. It's one of my all-time favorite films, so I think it's kind of like it changed a lot. Of course, it's like, I think also that time was a great period of social change. I mean, we're coming out of the 50s, going into the 60s, going into the 70s. So it's like the world was changing, though it has been changing a lot for us now. But it's just, I don't know. It sounds like it felt very much like a more massive wave of change versus today. It seems to come in weird kind of 2 steps backward, 1 step forward.
I think
kind of kind of a fractured thing. But anyway, but again, I'm speaking from ignorance. But yeah, I'm such a fan of that period.
Yeah, me too. And it's funny, we're talking nuance, and that I guess that leads us to something you brought up before we get on the show, something you wanted to talk about. And there's a lot of different ways to skin a horse, and a lot of different ways to present your work. And Chris and I are finding and this is interesting for erotica, but we're finding that a good amount of our books are either being published this way or someone's taking an existing book and bringing it out in audiobook format. You want to talk a little bit about that? Because we definitely wanted to get a shout out to WordWoos, who's the company that's doing a lot of our audiobooks. And if you go on soon, I think we're going to have some of that stuff available on Licking Non-Vanilla somewhere, maybe in the YouTube page, some excerpts. But Chris and I both have had this experience. Chris, talk a little bit about the audiobook thing, because I think this is pretty interesting. I mean, I find it interesting. I'm thinking maybe hopefully our listeners, because it's audio, maybe they'll find it interesting.
Well, thank you so much, Rob. I mean, you're always so sweet. And it came about because one, we've been having our versions of our books, our erotica books, produced by the wonderful folks over at WordWoos Publishing. And so they're doing, I think they're doing, I don't know if they're doing print, but they're definitely doing now ebooks as well as audiobook productions. And I think several of us have, I mean, both you and I have, ebooks as well as audiobooks with them, but they do an exceptional job. And I think we both have something like maybe 8 or 9 or even 10 or 11 different titles up there. And once again, hopefully we'll have them at the end of the show here so you can see them or at least listen to them. It's pretty easy to find. If you just go to Audible and type in either of our names, they'll pop right up. But yeah, it's like they do a phenomenal job. And I just recently did an anthology, a science fiction anthology, not erotic, just science fiction stories, called 9 to Eternity. And where the idea was, I had done a previous anthology where I asked a bunch of writers to contribute the story they just simply wanted to write without any kind of framework. And the follow-up one was asking the writers to contribute the story they liked a lot, but didn't get as much attention as they thought it should have. And, so I've got like wonderful stories from Your Sweet Self, as well as Jean Marie Stein, Ernest Hogan, Emily Davenport, Cynthia Ward, Arthur Byron Cover, and David Lee Summers, and The Estate of Jodie Scott. So I was really excited when I talked to the publisher there and myself. And I talked to the Word Was publisher, and I said, would you be interested? He said, absolutely, and it's out now. So you can go to Audible and type in 9 to Eternity and get it, which frankly, I'm curious to hear because it's funny because one of my favorite writers in the book, aside from your wonderful self, is Ernest Hogan. And Ernest Hogan is a science fiction Chicano writer. So he uses a lot of Mexican and Latin American phrases. And I'd love to see how they did the audio version of that. Yeah. So I'm very curious about that. But they do an excellent version. And I think it's really cool because audiobooks for the longest time were pretty damn rare. I mean, I still remember when they used to come in like cassettes and you had to buy this binder and they cost a fortune. Yeah. And, you can still sometimes on YouTube, you can find people who uploaded those. And it's so funny to listen to them. Like I was listening to something the other day, I can't remember what it was. And about every 10 minutes, a voice comes on, turn tape over, it's translated from those old cassette days.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, I mean, audiobooks are so great, and they're really like going like hotcakes. I mean, they're really popular these days.
Yeah, and it's wonderful. Before we go any further, let me just say, you've reached Licking Non-Vanilla, and this is our podcast. My name's Ralph Greco Jr., and that's M. Christian over there. You can't see him, but I'm saying he's over there, and we're the co-hosts here at Licking Non-Vanilla. And you can find us on the various different platforms and go to our website, which is lickingnonvanilla.com. I know it's very creative how we came up with that name. But, I was thinking about, out of all the genres to be presented in audiobook, I would say erotica has got to be one of those that is just going to be pretty damn interesting as far as the person you get to read the book, the way it's presented, because erotica is not, and I'm not saying this because we write erotica and we're so wonderful, although we are. I'm saying this because I'm thinking out of all the genres that you're going to make into an audiobook, that seems to be one that's going to take a little bit of a different kind of, maybe a little bit more of a learning curve to get there. And I could be wrong because to tell you the truth, I think I've heard some snippets of my stuff read, and of all different types of stuff. But it's certainly a different way of looking at things. I mean, erotic audiobooks, and because we're in the business here of doing a podcast that has a sexual element to it, erotic element to it. It is certainly a world we're interested in. I guess you got to find the right actor and actress and all that kind of stuff,
I agree with you 100% because it's one of those weird things that, I mean, I feel weird reading my stories in public, which I don't like doing ananyway. But, when you're talking about something like that, especially if you're reading a story that's from, for instance, a female identified person's point of view, and you're obviously, don't sound like that. Or one thing I've also found is some books translate better than others. I remember listening to some science fiction author who has work I like as an audiobook, and it didn't work very well because his writing was very visual. In other words, the way he constructs the paragraphs as such. It's like, we mentioned before, one of our favorite writers is Alfie Bester. Alfie Bester is really hard to translate as an audiobook because he's a very visual writer. He likes this kind of like playfulness with topography, like how would you translate the telepathic conversations in Demolished Man into an audiobook? It's impossible because they're written in this kind of like crisscross matter in the middle of the book. So erotica can sometimes be like that, where, it's like trying to translate something that is designed to be read versus listened to. So, I've always kind of, thought it'd be kind of fun one of these days to experiment and try and create something designed to be read as opposed to, that's been changed from a text to reading, especially around erotica. But yeah, I think it's really quite cool. And you're right. It's like, it is kind of tricky to read too, because it's like you have different characters, you have different voices. And I have to say the guys, once again, over at Wordwoods do an incredible job. They're really, excellent at it. And
really
so
do.
they're not just like, no insult to LibriVox, which is this nonprofit, group that reads public domain works, and they take turns. This is one person reading the entire work. And so it really has a kind of nice little kind of homogeneous feel to it. So you don't have suddenly a voice jumps out of nowhere who's a totally different person. But it's really quite fascinating. I have to say that I think a lot of times I know I listened to it a lot when I was working. I was working as a stalker at night, so I just put my earphones in and get Audible fired up. People listen to them when they're driving. They're good for meditation, all that kind of stuff. So, and I also know it's one of those things that you can do on the QT, which again, that's why Erotica took off so much, is because of ebook readers. People didn't have to go out to their local porn store or sit there on public transportation with a book that says "Love's Torrid," fill in the blank, erotic title with one of those cheesy, very low res. Really kind of grotesque, porn images on the cover. They can sit there with a Kindle and read whatever they want. Same thing with audiobooks. Right. So I think that's why they've sort of taken off. But it's really quite cool. And I have to say, once again, these guys do a fantastic job. Yeah,
it's just fun. For us, any way we can get our stuff heard, read, seen, any attention to it is wonderful. And I think that's true for anybody at any level. I don't care if you're Bruce Springsteen put out a new album. He recently did something at Apple Plus or Apple TV about making his new album. So everybody is always trying a way to get heard and seen and recognized. And if it falls in line with what you want to do, because when we were approached, Jim approached me because I had a book with Jean Marie, who Jean Marie Stein is Renaissance ebooks, and I have a lot of books with her. So as does Chris, and Chris is the acquisition editor over there still, I think. And but Jim came to me and said, would it be all right to take one of these books and make it into an audiobook? And I said, well, you're gonna have to ask Jean Marie. I can't answer that question. But and she was all for it because Jean Marie's wonderful, and she's all for us getting as far and wide as we can. But anyway. And the first time I never even thought about it, because like you were just saying, I have written specifically for audio, like a radio play, for instance. The call goes out for that. I play, either I've written or something will fit for that or whatever, or I write for it. So I've done that. But it's never been converted like that, the way Jim wanted it converted to Wordwoods. And it was interesting to hear it for the first time. It was a whole different way of doing things, And so I'm happy we did it. For the most part, I'm down for what anybody wants to do to our stuff, because it's just another way of getting heard and seen. And, like this podcast, another example, we're trying to keep everything, I guess the word is synergistic, right? Everything kinds together in a way that it all feeds something else. And at the end of the day, we want to make our living from what we do. So this is just another way of bolstering interest or getting our ideas out there or building an audience,
Absolutely. And, I want to give you a big round of applause, because you've been putting up some wonderful content on the Licking Non-Vanilla blog, and it's like doing an exceptional job. But that's really important, I think. That's something I think a lot of creative people forget. It's like, you may want to do fill in the blank, screenwriting. But, if you just focus on one medium, if you focus on one only thing, there's all kinds of other things you could be doing that would enhance your visibility, and therefore maybe help get gigs and such. So like you do one act plays, you've done like you said, radio shows or radio performances, you've also done comic books and God knows what else. You're incredibly diverse, Ralphie. I've done a little bit of that, but nowhere near the extent that how much you put yourself out there with those things, which I think is ultra cool. I've tried my hand at like stage writing, and I think I gave up after like the first page. But it's like, if you're a creative person, don't just think about one thing. There's all kinds of things. If you're a writer, you can do podcasts and audiobooks and, comics and, nonfiction. And if you're a musician, you can do all kinds of things as well. Same thing with filmmakers. It's just that you kind of have to think outside the box a little bit when it comes to, sort of like, getting your word out there. And it's fun. That's the other thing. It's like, when you suddenly realize, hey, I'm actually pretty good with this, or this is actually enjoyable to do, then go for it, because sometimes if you do the same thing over and over again, even if you're really into it, it gets to be kind of a drag after a point. Kind of, liven things up. It's really quite fun.
Yeah, and I certainly don't know every avenue that's open to me. I don't, there's so many different ways to do it. And you could also say no to something comes along and it's not your thing. You say, look, that's a great opportunity, but I'm just not all that interested for whatever reason. But there's just a lot of ways to do things these days, and and look, unless you are Bruce Springsteen, most people are not in a position to really. I mean, you could say no. I'm not saying that, but most people are not in a position to to dismiss some sort of some sort of attention. Not, most people, I mean, you and I have had those occasions where we have been invited to do something and we've demurred because of whatever reason. But generally speaking, we kind of listen to anything that comes around down the pike. And we were just talking about something before we went on the air with our producer, and everybody say happy birthday to him today because it's his birthday.
Happy birthday, Mark.
Happy birthday. Anyway, but we were just talking about another opportunity we have to take some of the posts we have the posts we were talking about, the blogs, and post them with somebody else, and who will give us a hit back to our site. But you and I went back and forth about it the last couple of days to see what the situation was and suss it out and find out. And not every situation works, and this happened to work okay. So we were like, all right, well, we're amiable to it. Let's see if we could open this up. So I think that's kind of what it comes down to, because I certainly, and there's some things because of whatever circumstance, my age or my prejudices, that I just don't do because I just, for whatever it is. But I think that's a case for all creative people who are trying to make a living at their creativity. As we always say, you don't burn a bridge. Well, the other thing you don't do is you don't unilaterally say no. Let it come across your transom. Look at it. Maybe call your buddy Chris and ask him what he thinks. But I mean, generally, figure it out and see if it works for you. So we like to send that message out. If you're doing something in the creative field, and maybe you're not getting the traction you want, or you're just doing it one way, there are a lot of different ways, and consider this stuff, for
absolutely. I mean, it's like it can be a drag because you both of us and like a lot of people who are professional, creative people know this one. It's like you get these things on a fairly regular basis. Someone says, "Hey, would you want to do this or something similar?" And 99% of the time it doesn't work out, or it's not paying. They just want, it's like, we'll give you exposure. It's like, yeah, that and $1 will get me, nothing.
Yeah.
But
Right.
But at the same time, you can't really slam the door in their faces because who knows where it could lead. Because even though they may not be able to work with you, maybe they know somebody else, and because you had a good, you didn't part with a negative way, like you like to say, and I think it's important and wonderful. And we both say this is never burn a bridge unless you absolutely have to. Because who knows? I mean, sometimes people sit around and say, "Yeah, I'm looking for content." Well, yeah, that guy Ralphie was a great guy. We didn't work out together, but try him. It's like you'll be surprised how many times that happens. And Absolutely. But also, it's like I think it's always a good idea to stretch yourself because you never know what you're good at. I mean, I never set out to be an erotica writer. It's just because I tried to be a writer and nothing sold, and then I got this opportunity to write erotica, and it sold, and now I'm an erotica writer. The same way with anything. Right. I mean, if you have an opportunity to write westerns, give it a shot. If you have a chance to write, anything for that matter. If you're a musician and someone says, write me a commercial jingle, it's like, well, give it a shot. I mean, the worst that happens is it doesn't work and you're not good at it, or it's something you don't like to do. But you'd be surprised how many times it's like you sort of like wake up and go, I'm actually a pretty good jingle writer, or this was actually a lot of fun, or, something like that. So it's always a good idea to stretch yourself. I mean, that's why wouldn't say annoyed, but sometimes, I know when we teach our writing classes, it's like, people only want to be able to do one thing. It's like, well, that's fine and dandy, especially if you're doing erotica. Like they only want to write one kind of sex scene. Well, it's fine and dandy and more power to you. But if you're thinking about becoming a professional, diversification is the key because you can't sell the same kind of story over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. So you have to learn to sort of expand your horizons. Try, everything from BDSM to age play to GLBT fiction or something similar. Just, get out there and stretch your wings because who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's just I mean, certainly I think probably the older you get too, you realize there's just so many different ways of doing things, and especially nowadays. Mm-hmm. And everybody's doing stuff on this this thing we call the net, in a whole bunch of different ways, and then but erotica writers, we've seen this in the classes, they tend to get tripped up for multiple reasons. One is like they see the success of, say, a 50 Shades of Grey, and they're like, well, this is what I want to do. I'm going to do it this way, and that's how that happens. And I'm like, well, that's an anomaly. Things don't happen usually in that way. That whole story is a very unusual story in the way that even happened. So, and how that grabbed the zeitgeist. I mean, when that happened, people who are not even erotica writers jumped in the bandwagon. This is the way it always is. Jump on something popular. Like, well, I could do that. And I'm like, well, it's possible you could, but that's a rare case. Most of this stuff that we talk about, whether it's getting proficient at playing the drums, or being a great painter or a writer, most of this stuff takes a lot of time and a lot of work, and and keeping your eyes and ears open to all different opportunities and all different ways of doing things. So I guess the shout out to all the creative people is, keep your options open. And
exactly,
if you're looking for great writers, well, you got them here. That's no problem. But I don't have to go much further than right here. But even Chris and I say it constantly. We say it down to, we're just hacks, man. That's all we are. Mm-hmm. You can hire us, and we'll write for you, and that's kind of what we do. That's put the pencil on our back, and we have pencil will travel. But
exactly, we're literary streetwalkers. That's us.
Right, it's absolutely.
Like, we'll do anything, or we'll do anything for $1, or write anything for $1.
Right, word prostitutes.
Exactly, we're word prostitutes. That's us. It's like it's like we're into something that's like, okay, like the first reaction is an ew or I'm not interested. It's like, okay, how many words? When do you want it? And how much I'm getting paid?
Right.
It's just like I kind of love that. I was kind of I don't know about you, but I kind of see myself as like. Gillis in Sunset Boulevard has that kind of attitude absolutely. Of being like, I kind of always like that. I mean, I think Bill Holden's my spirit animal sometimes, because I kind of feel like, that kind of character is that's like, it's like, oh no, I'm not doing high art. It's just like, yeah, what do you want? When do you want it? And, okay, right. No problem. It's like, but I agree with you once again, tremendously so, because it's like, it's like you need to like stretch yourself. You need to reach out in different plays. You need to do all kinds of stuff, but also understand the reality of it. That's the thing that if I could sort of like, I know we're kind of wandering a bit here, but just sort of like tell people who want to be writers, particularly, it's like there's still so much misinformation out there, and so many people who are just like don't quite understand the mechanisms behind it. It's really quite it's something that. There's writing for fun, which hopefully you do no matter what you're writing. I mean, I can't speak for you directly, Ralphie, but I know no matter what I'm writing, I have a certain degree of enjoyment involved. Because if you don't do it for, if you do it just for money, it's going to burn you out in no time flat. But you also have to understand how the system actually works. And the very basic level, that's something we do in our classes, which hopefully we'll be able to do, a video class.
It's funny you were just saying that, because as you're speaking here, I'm thinking how much fun we've had at the kink conventions, but I would say out of all the classes we've ever taught, and then I'm getting right in the middle of your train of thought. Sorry to derail your train of thought. I would say we have the most fun in the writing classes, right? I mean, we do. Chris has a great way of teaching a tit torture class, because as one would. And we've done impact play and spanking classes, and a whole bunch of really interesting things. And but out of all of the stuff we've ever taught, I would say the writing classes we've had the most fun. Absolutely the most fun in the writing classes, because people are just dying for information, and it's so much fun to interact there and talk and just answer questions. So. I'm sorry, I got in the middle of that because Chris said something about the classes. I want to get back to these kink conventions. These kink conventions are so much fun,
I do. I agree. I miss them so much. I mean, it's like just because one, it's got a chance to get together with my best bud and see the cities and just hang out and such. But you're right. It's like teaching the classes is always a kick, especially the writing classes, because it's just so much fun. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I was trying to start as a writer, I had so many writing classes and they all sucked, because they usually were taught by people who, didn't know or weren't professional writers, or they were, kind of like dissect the frog thing where they take the story apart till it's dead So, you know,
Right.
I like to think we sort of give a very kind of grounded, approach to writing, what
Yeah.
it is. That's wonderful and fun and may make you a little bit of money, but it also puts your whatever genitals you happen to be equipped with in a meat grinder, because it's not,
Right.
it's not something you can't do unless you're prepared for that.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, and this show too. This show is another way of reaching out. You know, whether it's about writing, whether it's about how much cock to take in your face. You know, I mean, whatever it happens to be. We're talking about. The great byways of Belgium, or whatever it happens to be. We would like to keep it interesting here and fun, and we're gonna keeping with that, we're going to get some more new guests on now that we're well into the new year, and we're going to keep delivering here. So we're going to wrap it up, I think, here at Licking Non-Vanilla. Thank you for listening. Go to the website, go to our pages, our various pages to hear the show. Please comment, because we know you're out there. We haven't heard from anybody. Want to hear from people, and want to know what you're thinking and what you want to hear and all that kind of stuff. I have been and will always be Ralph Greco Jr. From the wilds of, looks like it stopped snowing. Well, no, it's still snowing in New Jersey. And across the aisle from me, but not that far across my heart, is...
Chris, otherwise known as M. Christian, and I think the sun's out, so just to rub it in.
So he's doing good. All right, there you go. Thanks,
we have sunshine.
Thank you. All right, well, kids, we had a really good time. We'll talk to you next time, and thank you for listening to Licking Non-Vanilla.
And visit us on the web at www.lickingnonvanilla.com.